It's time to talk about the Rock and Roll Hall of... Let's try that again. Okay, come on. Get excited. Get excited. It's time to talk about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominees of... Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. And it is that time of year again where you got a new batch of nominees out there from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, this time for their class of 2024. You know, I have been a long time follower of the doings of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I've been to the museum in Cleveland. It's a great experience. I believe in the overall mission and the idea of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, I teach history also, so it's sort of, preserving history and then the music I love. It all kind of goes hand in hand and makes sense. Also, the fact that we can discuss this some other time, but I think there are a lot of people who agree with me that in some respects, this sort of rock era is coming to a close. Maybe having some sort of historical perspective over this era makes some sense. But yeah, I've got a lot of issues with how the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame does things, as I'm sure you all do. If you understand how it works, the recent ejecting of Jan Winter off of their board or whatever, I think is a good thing to happen. What is clear? What is clear to me is what the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has been for a while now is not so much just rock and roll or rock music. It's less myopically rock, and it's more maybe renaming it might be appropriate. Popular music museum, right? Or the Popular Music Hall of Fame. It's at least shown itself to be very open to genres that maybe influenced rock and roll, or were influenced or grew out of different parts of rock and roll. They've taken a very broad view. I mean, you have country artists in there, you have blues artists in there, you have R&B and soul artists in there, rap artists in there. So these things are sort of tangentially, related to rock and roll, either as influences or sort of, grew out of one area or arm of rock and roll. Yes, but if you're still bothered by the definition and what's rap to, I mean, why is rap in the Hall of Fame? I mean, that horse has left the barn a long time ago. So you sort of have to accept, that's the way it is. And I'm actually kind of okay with a broader definition. What has bothered me the most is there are still some egregious omissions from the hall, and everyone's got their little snubs list. Whoever, if you follow the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame at all. All right, so very briefly, so here's what I want to do. Let's kind of remind everyone real quick how it works, how someone gets nominated, what are the criteria, and then let's look at this new list of nominees and break them down and what do we think of them, and I'll tell you who I would pick out of that list, and then I'll tell you who I think actually will get in out of that list. So let's gotta do all this stuff. So how it works. To be eligible for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it has to have been 25 years since the release of your first commercial release. That could be a single, an album, whatever. So 25 years since the your first commercial release. All right, that's the basic eligibility. As far as the criteria, that has been an issue. That has been very vague. Over the years, if you kind of look at their website, they've changed the language over the years. But some of the things that they have mentioned as supposed criteria to get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is influence, innovation, and quote musical excellence, whatever that means, and that can mean whatever you want it to mean, which means it's very broad. All right. And they have come out, and even though I think in earlier days they denied this, but now they have come out and said and that they will actually consider, just basic popularity and sales numbers. That can be a consideration as well. So it's wide open. It's wide open. Um, and so just real quick, there is a nominating committee. It's very secretive, and they meet and they throw out this list of nominees. This year it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There are 15 nominees. And then normally out of that list, although they've been going a little bit airing more on the larger side, which is good. But we can predict maybe 7 of those will get eventually, be the inductees. And then the ones that didn't get it can kind of go back in the pool and get renominated and all that. And so once the nominating committee nominates them, then there's the larger voting body, which is music journalists, industry insiders, musicians, all living inductees get a vote. I have read multiple places, somewhere between 400 and 500 people are able to vote. And there is a fan vote. If you go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's website, you can sign in and vote once a day. But it's much less power than it sounds, because they count all the fan votes up and create a ballot over whoever wins the fan vote, and that's one ballot out of the 400 to 500. So, yeah, you do it to kind of feel good and maybe you're be a part of the process, but it really doesn't make that much difference. Okay, so that's how it works. That's how it works. Now, when I first saw this list, it came out a day or two, or well, I guess by the time this video is airing, several days. Yeah, I wasn't excited at all. In fact, this was one of the least exciting lists I think I've ever seen. But I'm glad I waited for a little while instead of just kind of recording a reaction video immediately and getting it out there, because some of this stuff I've kind of let just percolate, and I've kind of thought more about a lot of these nominees, and even though I'm not a big fan of most of them, I think you could make somewhat of an objective argument for most of them. And that's what's often really hard. Is a lot of times it's a knee-jerk reaction. Your favorites aren't on the list, you're angry, right? Or if someone's on the list that you don't like, oh, they shouldn't be in the hall. But you got to kind of step back and just sort of look at their credentials and look at their resume, and if you so take for instance, one of the nominees is Mary J. Blige. Um, I'm sure I've heard her music. I couldn't identify a song of hers if I heard it. Certainly don't own any of it. But in doing only a few minutes of research, just kind of looking her up and looking at her career, uh, based on the criteria and who they have let in, she's actually one of the most deserving of these 15. Even though I don't listen to anything of hers, and I couldn't tell you that was her if you played a song for me. But looking at the criteria, she's known as the queen of hip hop soul, right? She's considered one of the pioneers in bringing together R&B and sort of rap vocalization and rap, kind of harder beats, sort of marrying those. And if you just even have a passing understanding of music over the last, or popular music over the last 20 to 30 years, that is one of the major trends in music, right? Is sort of marrying that R&B and rap and hip hop and all that. She's considered one of the first people to do that. Also, one of the first kind of female superstars in the hip hop genre. So something that rap, hip hop, especially very early on, very lyrically speaking, quite misogynistic, right? And she's sort of one of the first female superstars that are going to turn that on its head. So, plus on top of that, 9 Grammys, 4 American Music Awards, 12 Billboard Awards. So I may not like her, even be familiar. I can't even say I don't like her, because I'm just not even familiar with her music. But looking at the criteria, yeah, innovation, influence, can't speak to her musical excellence or not, but influence and innovation definitely. And so, that's why I think it's a little difficult making these judgments. But so let's kind of go through the rest of the list, and then I'll tell you who I would vote for and who I actually think will get in. So we just talked about Mary J. Blige, Mariah Carey. Definitely got the sales. Um, how influential has she been? I guess on a whole younger generation of sort of pop singers. You know, female pop singers. I don't know. I don't see a lot of innovation in there. Cher. Cher has been nominated. Um, Again, not a big fan. She's definitely been there. Definitely paid her dues in the music business since the '60s. Had some staying power. Made multiple comebacks. The Dave Matthews Band. I used to be a big fan of them. Um, Definitely great musicians. I don't listen to them much anymore. How influential or innovative have they been? It's hard to really say on those criteria. Eric B and Rakim. Again, not music I'm very familiar with, but yeah, I know my history and real pioneers in rap music. So if rap is legitimate in Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which it has been, I think they got a pretty strong case because those guys are pioneers. Foreigner. Now, there's the thing with actually more straight ahead rock and roll, classic rock, and all that. We have pretty much let in most of the big, the Beatles and the Stones and Led Zeppelin. All those guys have long been inducted into the Hall of Fame. So now we're, with those type of bands, we are looking more at the Bad Companies and the Foreigners and the Bostons and the Kansas, stuff like that. Um, which as much as we may lean more towards that naturally, like someone like me, classic rock guy. Um, Again, you got to try and step back a little bit. Was Foreigner really innovative, influential? I mean, they were huge. They were a huge classic rock band. I don't know. I don't know. Peter Frampton, the next guy. I like Frampton. I'm a I'm a fan of Frampton. I think he had an impact. I mean, hell, this had an impact. Frampton Comes Alive. I mean, the double live album of the '70s. This was one of the biggest. The Talk Box and Show Me the Way I Love, Show Me the Way. It's a great song. Yeah, I don't know. I'd go with and again, this is where I just kind of dig Frampton, so I'd kind of support him. So I'm sort of going against some of what I already said, but whatever. Jane's Addiction, another band I'm not a big fan of at all, but I think had a pretty big influence on alternative music going into the '90s. You had Jane's Addiction sort of before Nirvana and before Pearl Jam, and I think they were a little bit ahead of that curve. So yeah, I would agree with Jane's Addiction induction, even though I'm not a big fan of theirs. Cool in the Gang. Can you believe? I think this is their first nomination. Now, there's a ton of soul and R&B acts, bands and acts in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Obviously, that stuff is a huge influence on rock. Um, I've been a big proponent of Cool in the Gang getting in for a long time. So yeah, awesome. Lenny Kravitz. Here's a guy I think is cool. I like his music. Innovation and influence, I don't see that at all. In fact, I see a lot of his music is pretty derivative of a lot of stuff that came before. I don't know. Oasis. Oasis. Um, I like them. Kind of like Kravitz, though. How much innovation versus really being derivative of, stuff that came before. Sinead O'Connor. Um, I think impact, influence, definitely there. Definitely. I think it's in how do I put this? Poor taste. I don't know. That she has to die last year to then finally get nominated. Would have been nice to give it to her while she was alive, right? Ozzy Osbourne. He's been on my snubs list for a while now. Of course, Black Sabbath is already in. Although it took them, I think they were nominated. It took them their ninth nomination to get in, which is absurd. But now Ozzy as a solo artist, yeah, I think so. I mean, in his prime in the '80s and in the '90s, huge, figure in metal and just great stuff too. Real melodic metal and great stuff. Yeah, so I would love to make Ozzy a two-time inductee. Um, I my understanding is you pronounce it Sade. I would say Sade, but Sade, Sade, Sade. Smooth operator. Um, so Sade has a very devoted fan base. By the way, I actually have. I didn't pull it off the shelf. I've got two of her records. I inherited those. My sister. They're my sister's collection. She gave it to me, so I didn't buy them. But I do have two of her records, two early ones, Diamond Life and whatever the other one. Anyway, uh, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm gonna upset some Sade fans here. I don't see it. I don't see it. And see, that's another thing. An artist can be good, can be really good, but Rock and Roll Hall of the Hall of Fame. You can't put everyone in the Hall of Fame. So that's kind of what you struggle with sometimes. And then the final nominee this year, A Tribe Called Quest, who, yeah, pretty innovative from what again, I haven't listened to them all that much, but you know, in hip hop circles, sort of bringing in some jazz sampling. Anyway, from what I understand, pretty innovative group. Okay, so here are my picks. If I were a voter, or if I'm going to go to the website and cast my votes, I would go Ozzy Osbourne, Peter Frampton, Kool and the Gang, Sinead O'Connor, and yes, Mary J. Blige. Even if I personally do not know her music at all, but doing the research, she, she looks very important. Eric B. and Rakim. Now, like I said, anyone who's like an innovator, especially kind of creating the foundation of any of these genres, I think it's kind of a no-brainer. And Jane's Addiction. Those would be my picks. Now, here are my predictions. Here's the way I think it's going to go. I think Sinead O'Connor will get in. I still think they can resist, especially the fact she died last year or earlier this year, whenever it was. No, it was last year. Mariah Carey, I think she's going to get in. Whitney Houston, I believe, is in. So, that paves the way for that type of artist. I think Ozzy will get in. I think Ozzy Osbourne will get in. I think Cher will get in. I got a feeling on Oasis. I think Peter Frampton will get in, and he performed at last year's ceremony. That's usually sometimes a sign, right? And I think Dave Matthews Band will get in. I'm cool with that. I like them. I just don't know if they're hall worthy. And if they do go over, sometimes they'll go over 7. If there's an 8, I think Foreigner might squeeze in there too. All right. So, and again, one of my big beefs here is who's not in, who's still waiting out on the outside. And for instance, there's still no. That's going to be the topic of our next video. My top 10 snubs, top 10 artists not in the Hall of Fame who should be. That'll be next time on Amity Tracks. But for this video, in the comments, let's talk this list. You think it's a good list? You think it's a crappy list? You think it's who on this list would you support? You think is hall worthy? Who don't you think is hall worthy? If you had a vote and you could pick 7 of them, who would it be? Let's talk Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 2024 nominees in the comments. I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Please do subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, like the videos, share the videos. All that stuff helps us out. And we'll see you next time.